Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider inside of Coors Field, Patrick Lyons, talking about a big Rockies win, not one that's going to change this season, but a memorable one at least. The Rockies' first walk-off win of 2025 to avoid their 12th sweep of the season in 22 series. Would have been their 5th at home. But no, the Rockies win. So much to talk about. Injury updates to Kris, Bryant, Austin Gomber, some good, some to be expected. Shohei Ohtani's getting back on the mound. Let's talk about that. Atlanta series right around the corner. A lot of news to get to. Going to be doing this for about an hour. We'll see. Your comments, of course, in the chat. Get preferential treatment if you've got any of those comments. Make sure you let your voice get heard. But on Thursday, the Rockies 6-27 at home at Coors Field, the worst record in the majors at home, the worst start that they had ever had across 33 games. They get down early, 7-2, with Antonio Senzatella not having his best stuff once again. Only lasted 4 innings, gave up 9 hits. That's now 110 hits across his 13 outings this year. Most hits ever allowed in the first 13 outings of any Rockies player. Gave up 7 runs. That's now, I believe, his 4th time giving up 6 or more runs. Walked 3, only struck out 2, only gave up 1 homer, but still put the Rockies in a losing proposition, down 7-2. Some might be asking, well, why wasn't the opener employed? Something that manager Warren Schaefer did on Friday to start this homestand. Ryan Rollison pitched the first inning, got through some of the most potent hitters in the Mets lineup. Well, according to Warren Schaefer, I did ask him about that in the pregame scrum on Thursday. Ultimately, it came down to 2 factors. One, bullpen wasn't quite shorthanded, but Tyler Kinley and Zach Agnos were not going to be available unless an extreme emergency in this game. So they were already down 2 relievers. Anthony Molina was called up from AAA. So really, they were down 1 reliever. That being said, Schaefer was hoping that Senzatella could build on some of the momentum that he had on Friday with the 4 scoreless against the Mets. Unfortunately, he was not able to do that, and he continues to struggle. He has got an 8.47 ERA through his last 12 appearances. Remember, he started the year rather well. I think he pitched that second game against the Rays, which the Rockies did end up winning. Pitched good in his next outing, I believe, against the Phillies. Wasn't that? No, he gave up runs in that outing. But still, Senzatella building off of that spring training, which was historic. I think that was the lowest ERA a pitcher had ever had in Rockies history in their spring training, but not able to build up that level of consistency and translate it to the regular season. There is a little bit of a shakeup in the rotation, which I will get to. Not sure how much longer they are going to stick around with Senzatella. Sure, you might not like the odds of winning a ball game with Senzatella in the game, but I think some of the Rockies' decision going forward have to do with protecting some of their younger guys, some of their younger starting pitchers, and saying, well, we might have a better chance to win a singular ball game with so-and-so in the rotation, with whatever early to mid 20-year-old starting pitcher in the rotation, but it might not be good for this player's progression, for their development. And so I think some of what you've been seeing over the last couple of starts for Senzatella has been more about a certain lack of depth in the rotation. Tanner Gordon is on the IL. Austin Gomber, as of today, on the IL. You also have Ryan Feltner on the IL. Dollander just came off the IL. So the rotation has been a little bit banged up, and the depth is just not been there as much as the Rockies really thought it was to start this season. So down 7-2, the Rockies eventually start to chip away. 3 guys that contributed to this win: Jimmy Herget, 2 1/3 scoreless innings; Juan Mejia, 1 2/3 scoreless innings; and Halverson, 1 inning. He ends up getting the win for his work in the top of the 9th. Mejia in particular, I asked Schaefer about that. He's been solid. I think he gave up 4 runs in an outing versus San Diego last month. He did give up 3 runs to the Mets in his second outing in a row at home against the Mets. So they had seen him already. Gave up a homer there and 3 runs. But other than that, the dude's been really solid. When he came into this game in that 7th inning, there were 2 runners on and only 1 out. He got a 6-4-3 double play to end that inning. And then in the 8th, he worked around a walk to strike out all 3 hitters. So that was a Birdman-esque performance for Juan Mejia at a point in which the Rockies really needed that. So down 7-2 in the 6th, you had another home run from Mickey Moniak, 370 feet to left field. That was his 7th of the year, 18th RBI. He's quietly been one of the better stories so far for the 2025 Rockies. In the 7th, you had an infield hit by Jordan Beck, not the weakest of infield hits for him on the day. Get to that eventually. Sam Hilliard, draw a walk, batting 2nd. And then Thairo Estrada had crazy bad numbers with runners in scoring position this year. And he was hitting 3rd today, despite his .222 batting average and despite an even worse performance with runners in scoring position this year. That was another question I had for Warren Schaefer during the post-game media availability about the fact that Estrada really hadn't been good with runners in scoring position at a 154 batting average since coming off the IL, 143 on base percentage. So his batting average was actually higher than his on base percentage, 231 slug. Really, really poor. And yet he was able to pull through with a 2 RBI double there and bring the Rockies to within 2 runs. And Schaefer said, you look at what Estrada has done in his career, and he's just finding his groove, and really hadn't found his groove until today. He does go 3 for 5 against his former club with that big 2 RBI double, even contributed to the rally in the 9th inning, which got started with a walk from Sam Hilliard, a single from Thairo Estrada. Ryan McMahon had himself a walk. Brenton Doyle did a good job to advance a runner. I think that ended up scoring a run there. You had Hunter Goodman. So the Rockies had 2 bullets. Their starting lineup did not have Hunter Goodman and Tyler Freeman. So you look at Antonio Senzatella on the mound and you think this is going to be a hard one for the Rockies to win. Probably one of the more improbable games for the Rockies to win based on how the Giants had come from behind twice in the past 2 days. They were in the middle of a 7-game winning streak with their eyes on the Dodgers. Maybe that was the tell right there. But had won 7 in a row and was looking to put away the Rockies early, give their bullpen a little bit of rest. Hayden Birdsong was good, not as good as he was his last outing. 6 innings, struck out 12 Rockies, and I think that was his Coors Field debut last year. He was solid in a quality start, but the bullpen just couldn't get it done. Now, Bob Melvin was not using his best relievers, and a bullpen that has been really solid as of recent. They had a chance to put the Rockies away early. So Senzatella on the mound, coupled with no Hunter Goodman, who had 11 extra base hits over the course of his 8-game hitting streak, had a ridiculous 1029 slugging percentage. In fact, no Rocky had 11 extra base hits over an 8-game span since Brenton Doyle last year when he was player of the month in July. And really, no one had done that since 2020 besides Brenton Doyle. And then Tyler Freeman had reached base a career best 10 straight games and had hit safely in 9 of his last 10 with a ridiculous 448 batting average. You didn't have your 2 best bats in the lineup going into a Senzatella start. And yet the Rockies kept fighting. They kept battling. And you had 2 opportunities on those 2 bullets. You had Tyler Freeman coming in that 7th inning rally where they scored 2 runs. You had runners on first and second with 2 outs. Unfortunately, he rolls over one, 4-3 put out, a crisis averted by the Giants. And then in the 9th with multiple runners aboard, I think we even had bases loaded at that point for Hunter Goodman and Randy Rodriguez, who was in there in place of Camilo Doval, who's now been the closer. He took over from Ryan Walker earlier this season. Rodriguez got the strikeout of Goodman before Orlando Arcia in a deep at bat. It might have been pitch number 7. It was a full count. With the bases juiced, the game on the line. Giants ahead 7-6. And Orlando Arcia in a game, right? He kept things loose. He walked to contribute to somewhat of that rally in the fourth inning that got the 2 runs across. But early on in this game, there was a moment, I think it might have been the first inning, maybe it was the second inning, where when you throw the ball around the horn, the first baseman typically throws it to the shortstop, who throws it to the second baseman, who throws it to the third baseman, and they get the ball back to the pitcher. Well, Arcia whipped the ball to Tyro Estrada at second base, who kind of wasn't ready. He was looking and was surprised. They were shrugging. They were pointing at each other. A little bit of levity, a little bit of positivity, a little bit of fun. And that's something that, both Ryan McMahon talked about post-game and Orlando Arcia talked about post-game, trying to show some of these young guys to still go out and play this kid's game, have some fun, and not wear all of these losses and all of these games that you give back to the other team. That is just simply something that you can't do. You got to allow the young guys to feel good and not worry about the record. Wild the Innocent in the chat saying, Juan looked pumped coming off the mound. Yeah, he didn't quite go as Jake Bird ballistic coming off after that third strikeout of the inning in the 8th, but he was shouting in his mitt. He did shout. He was excited, and he should be for him in his career, despite the score, despite the fact that had the Rockies lost, had the Rockies fallen to 12-56, that would have meant they were in sole possession for the worst record through 68 games in any big league season to start. They would have gone past the 1932 Boston Red Sox. They won, and yet they're still tied for the worst 68-game start in franchise history. That was a question that was asked of Ryan McMahon in the post game about, hey, knowing that had you lost, you would have been in sole possession. Well, first off, Ryan McMahon doesn't know that. That was not one of my questions. Ryan McMahon is not aware of that. They are aware, of course, the fact that this is amongst one of the worst starts in baseball history. That they're aware of. The specifics of all of that, no, not exactly. And hey, if we win today, where does that leave us in terms of the 1932 Red Sox? They don't know that. But immediately, Ryan McMahon did say when asked about, hey, a little bit of history on the line, he said, yeah, we know we are 13-55. He said that point blank. We know we are 13-55. That being said, you can't wear all those losses. You can't even get any of that back. The Rockies aren't going to be able to turn things around in any positive way. They have to play something like 50-46, I think, the rest of the way. It's even worse than that. But they have to be over 500 to avoid losing 100 games. And you can't do that with the way that they've been playing right now, with the talent or lack thereof on this roster, and without everybody clicking. This was a game in which the starting pitching did not click. This was the first time all season long that the Rockies had come back after trailing after 8 innings. The Rockies were 0-49 when trailing after 8 innings this season. Now they are 1-49. Now they finally got themselves off the schneid, because we've been seeing it time and time again, and I've been talking about it time and time again on the Rockies Insider, that there are 4 legs to the stool that wins ball games. You got to have the starting pitching. You got to have good relieving out of the bullpen. Your offense needs to do something, and your defense needs to come through. And this was really one of the first games in which you had one of those legs of the stool not be strong, but the rest of the legs of the stool were strong enough to hold up the Rockies. In the past, that hasn't been the case, where they've been strong enough to do that. Rockies got tacos today with the walk-off in the 8-7 victory. That was a big one. The bullpen shutting things down for 5 innings. The offense doing their thing, and the defense not making an error. There are a couple of weird plays where maybe you look and say, at a different point in time, maybe is that made, but nothing egregious. Nothing egregious. So that was a full team victory. And, the veterans on this team, they're really trying to show some of these younger guys to not wear all of these losses. Tyler Kinley, I think it was the other night. It might have even been Wednesday night after, his blown save, his performance late in the ball game where the Giants were able to come back to win 10-7. But Tyler Kinley stood in front of his locker and was almost willing, in a sense, almost not daring, because it wasn't any kind of negative connotation behind it. But looking at the reporter standing in front of his locker saying, please talk to me because I didn't do my job and I want to talk about it. And I want other guys in the clubhouse, particularly the young guys, to know what that means, to stand up and say, I didn't do my job. I need to do better. Not just we need to do better, specifically owning it. And that was something that happened on Tuesday night when Zach Agnos blew that game. He stood in front of his locker and talked to the media. That's something that these young players are trained to do at the beginning of the season. For the most part, they do it. But in this really rough season where nobody should have to own any loss at this point, especially not any of the young guys, right? This is a failure of the front office for putting this roster together. And so, there are young guys getting opportunities, but sometimes those opportunities means the spotlight is on you. And when you don't get it done, you're going to be asked about the worst start in baseball history. You're 23, 24 years old. You just debuted. You're now a big leaguer. And all of a sudden, you have to weigh all of that weight on your shoulders. That can be a lot. That can be really rough. So some of the veterans are trying to take that weight off these players and have a little bit of fun. That also was a change that I saw in the clubhouse. I want to talk about that in a second. Felix saying Ryan Ritter looks solid. He now has a base hit in his first 6 games in the majors. The last Rockies rookie to have a hit streak that long to start a Rockies career, David Dahl, with a 17-game hit streak back in 2016. So Ryan Ritter had himself a nice day at the plate. Didn't he have 2 RBI? He did. He got them on the board with 2 runners aboard, had himself a single. So he continues to play really strong with his 4 RBI batting average, just a shade below 300. So he's been great, doing a good job defensively. Wild the Innocent pointing out 7 runs or more 2 days in a row. Hey, Rockies fans, y'all are eating good right now. That's great. Luke, Rockies walk-off. Yeah, that's something that the Rockies have been missing, that I really felt that despite how poorly they had been playing to start the year, which has been the case really the last 3 years. 2022, they started off really well. But even 2021, not a good start. 23, 24, really bad. But then eventually they caught a little bit of momentum at home. The last 2 years, they've won 37 games at home. The last 2 years, 37 games at home. So still under 500, but you look and say, hey, you know what? We win 4 of those close ball games. Now we're over 500. Now we finished 41-40 at home. Also, last year you had those 2 games in Mexico City. So I don't know how you want to tweak that math there, but basically they play about 500 when at home, and they've been extremely far from that at home this season. Now, maybe now with a walk-off win, a little bit of swagger, a little bit. If you're not watching right now on YouTube, or if you're not going to go over and watch the video, I got beautiful Coors Field behind me. So if you're listening to the audio only edition of this, you're really missing out. You're really missing out big time. But it's really been that close. And I think now maybe they can have some momentum back at home, and they're able to come from behind and make these games a little bit more interesting. The games have been interesting in the wrong way for the past 2 days here at Coors Field, with the Giants coming back to win. But nevertheless, maybe the Rockies can use this to help shift their momentum just a little bit. Sure, those 3 wins in Miami didn't do anything. They lost the next 5. But maybe there's something more to the positive play on the field. And how about this? This is an interesting stat. It's definitely a small sample size, but is it something? I don't know. I don't know. You tell me if it's something. At Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, and at Rockies Insider. The Rockies are now 4-4 when Orlando Arcia starts a game. Sure, that's 3 wins in Miami, but that is what you saw on Thursday with the walk-off win. So small sample size, but no one else over any 8-game stretch of starting games have the Rockies played a 4-4 or a 500 record with. So we'll see what happens with that, but the Rockies need that veteran presence to try and keep things loose. And so what I was going to say before was, in the clubhouse, the vibe wasn't totally different, I would say, on Thursday, going into what could have been another sweep, this one against the Giants. But the Rockies have Bino in the clubhouse now. I think this is going to be a permanent fixture. LA has it. The Dodgers have it. The Marlins have it. And so there are two Bino boards. I've never played Bino. And some of you are saying, I have never even heard of Bino. Am I pronouncing it right? I don't even know. It's Binho. It's basically soccer, but with your fingers, and there's little pegs on the board. And I've seen it plenty. I know John Boy Media, they do different things with that, but I had never seen one before. It was in the Rockies clubhouse. You had Juan Mejia versus Seth Halverson. Halverson won that one. Was there going to be a tournament going on? Maybe. That could be something that the Rockies need behind the scenes to keep things loose. That's not going to prevent them from losing 100 games. No. Could it prevent them from losing 120, 121? Again, there's no stats to back up that will happen, or that will be the case. But I think that is something, that is a change that needs to happen, just a little bit of keeping things loose. They're battling and they're being rewarded for those battles. And they're doing it for a guy that they know and respect, with, I think, a little fear in their heart as well. And not fear of Warren Schaefer, but fear of, man, is somebody else going to lose their job that we care about and that is doing their best? We need to do our best. We need to keep things loose. Rockies right now, keeping things a little bit loose. That celebration, I don't know who it was that fell down. I think there were two bodies on the ground during that celebration. I thought, oh gosh, I really hope nobody's hurt. That is not a good story. You come back and win the day after losing 21-0 to the Padres. Then you win on Mother's Day, and then Bud Black gets fired. You get a walk-off hit to stave off your 12th sweep in 22 series, and then someone gets hurt in the celebration. You do not want that. So the Rockies did not have that, I don't think. But they, like Ryan Ritter said in the postgame, you might have seen it on Rockies TV. I'll post that clip over on Rockies Insider on YouTube. He said it's going to be a happy flight, and it absolutely will be a happy flight. So Rockies keeping things a little bit looser than normal in the clubhouse. Bretton Doyle was playing against Hunter Goodman. Doyle had himself a good day at the plate, walked his first at bat, had an infield single. So did Jordan Beck. There's still so much more I want to talk about in this game. Most runs at the Rockies have scored, those 8 runs, their most in about a month, right? They scored 14 against Arizona on May 7th, their most at Coors Field, since they scored 9 runs on May 11th. That was Mother's Day. You've got the 7-27 record, which with the win, yes, the Rockies have to go 30-17 to just reach where they were at last year, that 37-win season at home the last 2 seasons. They're now at a negative 119 run differential. Not great right now. Their previous worst start was 22-46 in 2005. So now they're 13-55. Still 9 games worse than their worst record. Patrick, weren't you going to say something positive? Oh yeah, I was. What else we got? I did notice Senzatella threw 2 balls to the backstop. Rather, he threw 1 ball to the backstop today, 1 on Friday. That was, a little bit unusual for him. The baseball gods, we talked about this in the pregame, that the Rockies, the baseball gods haven't been with them. There was, during the rally on Wednesday night against the Giants, things just not going the Rockies' way, right? Bud Black might say that's baseball. Well, Jordan Beck hit a pop-up in the 3rd against Hayden Birdsong at a point in which, we're still early in the game. It's only the 3rd inning, but with how well Birdsong had been pitching this season, how well he had done at Coors Field against the Rockies last year, and the Rockies' overall lineup, as I said, without Goodman, without Freeman, certainly you could have imagined a deep no-hit bid for Hayden Birdsong. And yet this pop-up, sky high, no Giants touched it. No Giants even put a mitt on it. I asked the official scorekeeper during this game if it would have even hypothetically touched one of the strings of a Giants player's mitt, that would have been enough to have ruled it an error. Alas, it didn't fall. It didn't touch any Giants mitt. So it just fell in. That's a base hit that has an expected batting average of .010. Now, 010 as a batting average means 1 out of every 100 pop-ups like that are a base hit. And I asked Manny Randall about that from MLB.com, and who is a StatCast guru, not a stat goblin, but a guru. He knows his stuff about the fact that if you look at every single expected batting average of every single game, there is never any never any number other than 0 in this thousandths place. It always ends in a 0, which suggests to me we've got some rounding going on, right? It's never going to be it's never going to be a 287 expected batting average. It'll just be 290, which changes the math a little bit because, again, a 0-1-0 batting average, expected batting average for Jordan Beck on that pop-up then means 1 out of 100 pop-ups fall in, when I think it's probably a lot closer to 1 out of every 500. So that was strange. And then he got lucky on that. And then conversely, a little bit unlucky in his final at bat, drove the ball 420 to the deepest part of the ballpark. It's great. It was, that was a double. Was it? Now I don't even have a double in there. Okay. I think it was Jordan Beck hit a double, 420 feet. And the law of averages say, well, you got lucky on one, you're going to get unlucky on another. It did fall in, but it would have been a home run in all other 29 ballparks. So the law of averages, and once again, Bud Black would say, that's baseball. Wednesday's loss, what's there to say? Kyle Freeland, another quality start. I told you a couple starts back that he had been getting unlucky. His ERA, very high, but you look at the expected stats, the expected ERA was actually a lot better. And so third straight quality start for him, 7th on the season in 5 starts since May 19th, has a 3.49 ERA. So he's been really, really good. In the chat, watching the Giants drop timely hits in the large, all caps, Coors Field outfield this series, just so glaring at how this team struggles. The Giants, looking at their lineup, talking with some of the traveling beat reporters for the Giants, their lineup, after Jung-Hoo Lee, Willy Adames, who is starting to get hot right now, and then the 3-hitter Helio Ramos, now with Matt Chapman on the IL, it's a little smoke and mirrors. They don't really have the bats to get this done. So this would have been huge for them going into LA. We'll see with the NL West, first place in the NL West on the line. This was not what the Giants certainly would have imagined in their getaway day, but Freeland really good. We saw him shave the beard and immediately go out and have a great start. Zach Agnos, after having a rough outing on Tuesday, he did the same. Got rid of the mustache. Unfortunately, did not work for him on Wednesday in that late rally for the Giants. But the Rockies did snap a stretch of 11 consecutive games at home where they scored 5 or fewer runs, dating back to May 19th, second longest stretch where they hadn't scored more than 5 runs. There was a run in the summer of 2015 of 15 straight games where they just didn't have that big game on offense. So Rockies going into Atlanta now. We're going to get some scattered thunderstorms for all 3 days this weekend. We'll see what ends up happening with that. Strange times, again, expect that. They're all over the place. 5:10 on Friday, Germán Marquez against Bryce Elder. 2:10 afternoon game on Saturday, Chase Dollander versus Spencer Strider. That could be a very cool matchup. And then June 15th, Sunday, that's going to be Father's Day, 11:35 Mountain Standard Time. Kris Sale, the reigning Cy Young Award winner, who did take the L against Chase Dollander when they were here in Denver, he is going to start against Austin Gomber, making his season debut. We had a transaction before the game on Thursday where Carson Palmquist was optioned down to AAA. This is going to be good for him to stay sharp and get starts down with the Isotopes. So expect him to start down in AAA for the Topes. And now Gomber, after only 2 rehab starts this time around, he did start on opening night on March 28th before getting shut down again. 2 4-inning starts down in the minors to rehab. Now he's going to be back in the rotation, taking Palmquist's place. We'll see what happens the next time around. If someone like Tanner Gordon comes off the IL to take Senzatello's place, maybe Ryan Feltner, no real news on him. He's going to continue to throw bullpens, and we'll wait and see what happens. Rockies perhaps showcasing Austin Gomber just a little bit at the trade deadline. And we're not going to see Craig Kimbrell in Atlanta. He just signed a minor league deal with Texas. He was good for Atlanta in the minors, over 18 innings. Had an ERA at 2, was striking out about 33% of hitters with Atlanta's AAA squad, the Gwinnett Stripers. But over the weekend in that series with San Francisco, I mean, it was technically a scoreless inning of work, but he got some help with the caught stealing and the pickoff where Atlanta just got swept. They just got roughed up by the Giants. He was let go, and one of Atlanta's catchers, James McCann, another one of those veterans, kind of blasted Atlanta for doing that. He said, quote, "They really frustrated me and a lot of other guys in our locker room. We're very frustrated by it." McCann said to The Athletic of Kimbrell getting let go and sort of treated like that, coming up for one game and then just getting bounced. McCann continued by saying, quote, "It was strange to call him up for a day and DFA him. He's not just a run-of-the-mill reliever who became a journeyman after 2 or 3 years in the big leagues. He's a future Hall of Famer." So things right now really ugly for Atlanta. You had the AJ Smith-Shawver incident where it looked like he had hurt himself, and, was the coaching staff really paying attention? There are some rumors that some were falling asleep in the dugout. So Brian Snitker, I would say, is probably on the hot seat. Again, some injuries there. You got Jurickson Profar, missing 81 games because of the PED suspension. That being said, they've had it rough, and this has been a rough start. I don't know if a change in managers is going to change things. Freddie Gonzalez, now the new third base coach. You don't see third base coaches, lose their position. So they tried shaking things up. It hasn't really quite worked. So it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening when the Rockies go there this weekend for 3 at Truist Park. Tovar news, nothing yet. He's probably going to end up needing more than 15 days. And really, the longer that this injury ends up lingering, the more you have to think that the Rockies are going to err on the side of caution and say, look, this is a lost season. Don't rush yourself back. Now, on the flip side, if you're Ezequiel Tovar, you don't necessarily want to sit on your hands. You want to continue to develop. You want to continue to get better. You want to continue to post for the back of your baseball card and develop and learn things. That's how you get better, is by playing. That's how you learn some things, is maybe even by playing a little bit banged up and not injured. There's a difference. Everybody's banged up. Everybody's hurt all the time. So that could be a value to Tovar. Now, the Rockies don't want that value. They're going to protect their asset, their investment, because he's locked up for a while. But still, Tovar's got a lot to do. He's got a long way to go before he even can sniff Hall of Fame. I mean, essentially 6 or 7 more years. He's got to put together 6 or 7 all-star caliber years to even start thinking about going to the Hall of Fame. That being said, in order to do that, he's got to get his first all-star game out of the way. It's not going to happen this year, right? Just not enough time to put up those numbers. But he's thinking about his future, and you don't have a future if you don't have a present playing actively. You also don't have a future if you're playing through certain injuries and making those situations worse. So, it's a tightrope. It's absolutely a tightrope to see some things. Also in the chat, how long do they keep Michael Toglia in Albuquerque? That's a great question. We saw him with that 7 RBI night. They're not getting a ton of production from Keston Hiura so far. They are, as I said, with Orlando Arcia, getting something out of him. They are getting, contributions of the veteran variety out of first base. Not a typical first baseman. He's a shortstop. So that's strange for him to be out of position like that. But if they're winning ball games and Toglia is getting better, I'll phrase it like this. There's no rush to get him back. There's no rush. Toglia has things he needs to work on. He needs to continue working on those things. And once he shows the Rockies brass that he's done that enough, they can bring him back and have him start to contribute and build upon that 20 homer season from last season. It's interesting because the Rockies, I like this. I don't think this is propaganda. I think this is a nice touch, but at the beginning of the game, when they show the leaders in the American League and the National League, who's got the most homers, most RBI, most strikeouts for pitchers, lowest ERA, they started showing the Rockies leaders. So after seeing, most home runs in all of the National League, you see most home runs on the Rockies. They're not trying to trick you and say, oh, wow, look at Hunter Goodman is leading all of the NL with his 11 home runs. They're not trying to do that. They're just saying, here's who's doing it the best for the Rockies. And Michael Toglia, with his 20 RBI, I think that's still third most on the team. His 6 home runs tied for fourth most. So he obviously had some success at the plate, but there are other things behind the scenes, I think, that he needs to work on, that the Rockies want him to work on. And I think he's doing those things now. So as long as he continues doing that, yeah, I think, we will see him again in the near future. Final question. I'm going to stick around here if you're watching live on YouTube. But no, Orlando Arcia had never played first base before. He had never started a game at third base or even played, I think, since 2022. So the Rockies are utilizing him as a utility guy at this point, the former Atlanta shortstop who goes back. Maybe he'll have some revenge against Atlanta, just like Tyler Estrada was able to do that on Thursday during the 8-7 win. At Patrick D. Lyons, MLB and Rockies Insider over on YouTube. Thanks for dropping by. I'm going to keep going here. Appreciate the momentum, but that momentum, it's only as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then. I need to get a drink of water. So enjoy the view of Coors Field while I catch my breath. And if you got any other questions, go ahead, drop them in the chat here on YouTube Live. Rockies Insider with me, Patrick Lyons, live from Coors Field. Part 2, talking about some injury updates, Kris Bryant, and mainly about the comments from former Rockies superstars on the current state of the club. Also going to tell you about some minor leaguers making noise, and then Shohei Ohtani pitching at Coors Field in 2 weeks. Maybe? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about that. But let's get things started with the Athletic articles. Andy McCullough wrote an article about some former Rockies players, some notable names, and their comments on their thoughts about the current state of the Rockies. And there were 5 players who were referenced in this article. And I'm going to talk about these comments in terms of spiciness. So the least spicy comment came from Tyler Anderson, who might be a forgotten name, but if you go back and look at what he did, a part of that club in 2016 and then 17-18, he was one of the veteran young starting pitchers who eventually was an all-star. He's one of the few guys to actually leave the Rockies and be an all-star after his time in Denver. He's now with the Los Angeles Angels. Very well could be and very well will be a strong trade candidate if the Angels really start to fall out of things. But Tyler Anderson discussing the state of the Rockies, saying, quote, they didn't get superstars like they got with Trevor or Tulo or Arenado or Blackmon. And that's true, right? Those were the guys that were there in the late 2010s. And despite the fact that even still to this day, the Rockies front office are talking about the young players that are supposed to be the next Arenado and Tulo and Story, or even Todd Helton. Not to say that you've got to be a Hall of Famer, but he was a homegrown guy, drafted and developed by Colorado, that those guys were coming. And unfortunately, that never came to fruition. Riley Pint being the 4th overall pick in 2016, the 3rd overall pick in 2015 in Brendan Rodgers, the top pick for the Rockies in 2017, which was not in the first round. The Rockies lost that pick because they signed Ian Desmond, who had gotten a qualifying offer from the Texas Rangers. And when the Rockies signed him, they actually coughed up their 11th. They actually coughed up their first pick, the 11th overall pick. It's still to this date the highest draft pick ever surrendered for signing a player to who had rejected a qualifying offer. So they didn't have the 11th overall pick in 2017. Instead, at Stillwater High School, they drafted Ryan Vilade, who unfortunately did not pan out as they would have hoped for in 2018. Their first pick 20th overall, Ryan Rolison out of Ole Miss, who unfortunately had various injuries, and we're now seeing him make an impact on the big league roster, but not as a starting pitcher as they would have hoped, now as a reliever. Michael Toglia, 21st overall in 2019, down in AAA. 2020 first overall pick, or the top pick, I should say, 9th overall. Zach Veen, down in AAA. Drew Romo, competitive balance round A pick, down in AAA. And 2021, things have started to get a little bit better. They've been getting contributions from guys. But you look at that cluster of guys that were selected by the scouting department, headed by Bill Schmidt, who's now the GM. It never really panned out. It never really came to fruition. You know, you got contributions even from guys like Peter Lambert. Garrett Hampson was in that group from the 2016 draft class, but you didn't get those star players that you were hoping for. And you need stars. You absolutely need stars. And then you need the second tier guys like Ezekiel Tovar and Brenton Doyle. After what they were able to do in 2024, they are great second tier guys. Can they still ascend to superstar status? Absolutely. But they're 2024 going into 2025, have them at that next tier of guy. 2 of those does not make for a 63 win team because there's little after that. And again, plenty of guys are developing, but you need all of those players to come together at the exact same time. And the Rockies just hadn't received that from their draft picks, from their minor league system. And so Tyler Anderson, not wrong. I'm seeing a comment here in the chat. Yeah, we're going to get to a spicy one. DJ LeMahieu, who, when he was here at the Yankees, you can watch the video over on YouTube saying in regards to seeing the organization falling apart after he ended up signing with the Yankees and not signing with the Rockies, saying, quote, "I think I made the right choice." He did. But in this article from The Athletic, LeMahieu says, quote, "I think they're a little behind for sure. That doesn't necessarily translate to wins and losses. It's not like I'm going to point to that and say that's the reason. But I think," joining the Yankees, "it was like, quote, wow, they're really, really on top of things here. That was like one of the biggest surprises." The Rockies have the smallest analytics team in all of baseball. According to reports from people that I've spoken to within the organization, the Rockies are the only team in all of baseball to not have their own version of wins above replacement, their own evaluation system in regards to that. And that's going to be one of those things where you're not going to get the most out of your players. And the Rockies need to do that. You look at the Mets, who have a guy who can read when a pitcher is tipping pitches, who can read when there are little tells, subtle tells. And you saw that in a Saturday's game against the Mets, where there were 3 stand-up stolen bases by the Mets, because New York employs a guy who's not his only job, but one of his main jobs is to watch the other players for tells. Rockies don't do that. That's something that DJ LeMahieu has seen with an organization like the Yankees, where winning is a priority and there's an investment to back up that priority. Arenado saying, quote, Nolan Arenado of the St. Louis Cardinals said, "The only way you get out of this, my opinion, is you have to really start over. Trade guys that have value and deal with the restart." But I don't know if that's what owner Dick Monfort wants to do. That's not really what they like to do. No, it's not. The Rockies, I don't think they would still even call this a rebuild, but that's just because that's a no-no word. They don't like that word. That's not a good word for them. They don't like the word rebuild, but that's definitely something that they need to embrace a little bit more. The problem with that is you're not going to have your 3rd straight 100-loss season, and strong odds to suggest you're already going to lose 100 games in 2026 that you're tearing down, and you're getting rid of maybe some of the most favorite pieces of fans. That's not a good look right now in the present. That's not a good look to the fans, just like it wasn't a good look for the Houston Astros when they were tanking. But the goal was to win more ball games realistically and have it be sustainable success. The Astros are still sustainable right now. The Cubs, you could argue, have been sustainable. They tore things down in 2021. They absolutely did. They trade Javier Baez and Trevor Williams for Pete Crow Armstrong, so that seemed to have worked out. but they were never totally out of it, even when they did choose to break up that team that won the World Series in 2016. So I think that's something that the Rockies just have to embrace a little bit. Problem is, Arenado says, look, you got to trade the guys that have value. Not a ton right now that do. Not a ton that do. And for some of them, their value is not at the high that it very well could be or has been. Bretton Doyle, his value is not at a high. Ezequiel Tovar is currently on the IL. So now might not be the best time to trade those two guys in particular. Trevor Story, still two more spicier comments than what we've heard from Tyler Anderson, DJ LeMahieu, and Nolan Arenado. Trevor Story saying, you want to see them do well, and it's tough to see how it's going right now. Yeah, it's hard. Don't necessarily want to speak on anything further than that. So no comment, which is nice. Maybe that's not spicy at all, but it's certainly indicative of the thoughts that these former Rockies have of the organization. And again, these are players that saw how the Rockies did business, and some of them saw how they did business when they were winning, which is a positive. But then things got worse, and then they went to other organizations and saw how they operate. And that's something that when word begins to spread like that, it does become hard to convince people to come play for your team when guys on the other 29 clubs, and maybe not all 29 are really clicking analytically as much as they should. Every team is dysfunctional in some way. But when word gets out about that, it becomes hard to convince players to come play for you. And last but not least, Troy Tulowitzki, a one-sentence answer of, quote, I don't comment on that organization. Pretty spicy. I don't comment on that organization. Not even saying I don't comment on the Rockies. I don't comment on that organization. Does that mean he's not going to be playing banana ball? I haven't talked about that this week. I got to put that in my notes at some point. I did not win the lottery. I did not win the lottery. Hope you did out there, wherever you may be. You have an opportunity to win the lottery, to then win another lottery and buy your tickets at a certain time. Very specific rules to get these Savannah Bananas tickets. Pretty wild. Now, I also talked about the vibes in the clubhouse changing with guys playing Bino. That's nice. Warren Schaefer, this was something that I found to be interesting. And Tiny, who runs the clubhouse for the Rockies, working in lockstep as they should about some of the things for Warren Schaefer's office, because he's the new manager. He might want a different layout. In fact, he does and did want a different layout. So he's got his office desk, jammed up against a wall, and then in the center, a couch for, more conversations, more of a hangout spot than, hey, I'm the guy behind the desk. I'm in charge. He's trying to do things differently. I think he's got a couple of pictures on the wall. I think they're eventually going to have the scorecard from his first game there. But now there's a big whiteboard that's got the names of basically every single player in the organization, the depth chart across all the different affiliates. So that's something that's different from Schaefer, that he's doing that Bud Black did not necessarily have. Did Bud Black have a depth chart pronounced? Yeah, of course. But still, just something different that's going on in there. All right, minor league report. You know what? Let me get to Kris Bryant, because I didn't talk about him when I wanted to. He's back in the clubhouse. Unfortunately, not progressing as well as Austin Gomber has been. KB did have that procedure a month ago. Now it's a little over a month, on May 8th, the ablation procedure, where they basically just singe the nerve so the body is not sending messages to the brain that it's injured. So it's not necessarily fixing the degenerative disc disease that he's got, but it's something that might allow him to play through that kind of pain, because now his body's not feeling that pain. He's not getting those messages. Now he's increasing his activity, but he did say on Wednesday that the running that he's been doing of all the baseball activities doesn't feel well. Playing catch on Tuesday and Wednesday, been fine. He's taken some dry swings, not hitting a baseball yet, but the light running and the dynamic warm-up exercises, it's not great. He spoke to Thomas Harding of MLB.com earlier in the week saying, quote, I'm just being completely honest. When I do run, I am sore, not just sore, but hurting. We've determined to keep trying and see if it continues, if it improves. That's where I'm at. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't thinking that some days I see the light at the end of the tunnel, some days I don't. I'm not sure if we're going to see Kris Bryant suit up for the Colorado Rockies. That doesn't mean we're not going to see Kris Bryant continually be on the 40-man roster for years to come. We'll see. We'll see about that. But let's talk about the minor league prospects making noise. Sterling Thompson, one of those guys we are going to see at some point this season. Not a ton of room right now in the big league roster. And I know some people are rolling their eyes at that, looking at some of the veterans saying this veteran is not going to be a part of the future. No, but it becomes really hard to just have a lot of young guys on a team and nobody else. You need some leaders on the team. And I know that can be hard to stomach a little bit. It might be hard to agree with, because I think I would agree on paper, just have all the young guys, but that does mean there's 4 young guys languishing away on the bench each and every day. Or if you say, well, they can get in the game late, maybe they even play half the game. Okay, well, then there's 4 other players that are coming out of the game early. And so you're getting half of a game for 8 guys. So the math doesn't necessarily work out terribly well. But Sterling Thompson, he's going to be needed to be added to the 40-man roster by the end of season. He's been playing great since May 1st, entering the week, 359 batting average with an OPS north of 1100. He's been really, really solid. And he's going to be a player that is struggling to find a position. You know, I want to say that, you know, he's sort of reminding me of a Sean Bouchard with a little more upside, where he can play the corners and he can play some first base, which is a position of need now to a degree, or it's certainly a position of uncertainty. I'll talk more about what's going on with the first base position here in just a moment, but you've got that happening. And, you know, he did play some second base at the University of Florida, but that's just not really working out for him. So we'll kind of wait and see. I think he's got more of an upside than Bouchard did when he first came up, but he's a player that, you know, will we see him sooner than later? I don't know, because I just don't think there's room for him right now on this roster. We'll see. We'll see what happens maybe after the trade deadline or after a deal is swung for somebody in the infield, whether that's Ryan McMahon, whether that's Tyra Estrada, but that then frees up some room to get Sterling Thompson on the 40-man and 26-man roster. I've mentioned this man's name before, even in the offseason. He's still young. I think he's still 22 years old. And people forget, Warming Bernabel. He was a thing before. I guess he stopped becoming a thing because he was taken off the 40-man roster. I think he can be a thing again. Saw a lot of top 30 rankings, and he was on the outside of a lot of those. Not for me. He was in the back end. I think I had him 29th because he's still young. He's still contributing. He's playing some first base in addition to third base. And since May 11th, he's been playing really, really well. And over his last 51 games, he is leading the Isotopes in batting average, tied with Ryan Ritter at 305. So that could very well be another young player we see late in the season. Down to AA Hartford, tip of the cap of Brian Castillo. He entered this week over his last 15 games with a 0.84 ERA. Can never use enough pitching. So nice job by that young reliever. Catcher first baseman Jose Cordova. It's a name you might start to see a little bit more. He actually leads the Eastern League with a 421 on base percentage right now. Pretty good for a catcher who can also play first base. I mean, is he Hunter Goodman 2.0? Not necessarily. Now, he did play in the Arizona Fall League last year. He was Rule 5 eligible and was not added to the 40-man. He'll be Rule 5 eligible, of course, again this winter. But he's recorded a hit in 13 of 14 games, playing really well over a certain span. And he's a guy that, you know, maybe could get protected if, you know, the depth chart for the Rockies catchers changes. I mean, they still have 3 catchers on the 40-man roster, even after Jacob Stallings was given his unconditional release. We'll see if Romo and Fulford are going to be given those opportunities going forward. I don't think Cordova will. There's not going to really be a ton of risk, I don't think, of him getting selected in the Rule 5 draft. He's already 25 years old. Doesn't have I don't think, the same upside as Hunter Goodman did when he was performing with the Yard Goats. He's still currently blocked by 3 other catchers, but it's possible if he gets poached. It's just there is a dearth of catching depth in the upper levels of the minors. You can get a veteran guy to do that. And you don't really see a ton of catchers taken in the Rule 5 draft because they just don't always have the same upside of younger players who at other positions maybe have one really high tool, really high performance tool, like a speed. Think about Everth Cabrera, who was poached by the Padres from the Rockies. He had that elite speed, and that earned him a spot in the majors. You got to go back to like 2014, if you remember Oscar Hernandez, who was selected as a 20-year-old catcher, 20 years old, selected. Didn't stick around very long. He's played all of 26 games in the majors. His last year playing affiliated baseball was in 2019 at the age of 25. Hasn't even played pro ball since 2023. And that was an independent league, the Frontier League. So Cordova, I think, is going to be safe and not something to be too worried about in general. Let's get to some comments here. Philip, have you heard any word on whether the organization will seek a president of baseball operations or an external audit? No, not right now. Is that something the Rockies are waiting to do in the offseason? I don't necessarily think it's going to be better for them if they wait to the end of the year. I think they can do that right now. I don't know if they're doing that behind the scenes. One of the sources that I was aware of that ended up getting squashed, unfortunately, so that didn't come to fruition. Have they gone another route? Is it external? Is it maybe more of an internal audit? That wouldn't surprise me. We did see that when Jeff Bridich resigned or was fired, depending on how you want to look at it. But when Jeff Bridich resigned in April of 2021 and Bill Schmidt was the interim GM, by all accounts, Dick Monfort even said, we're going to look outside the organization. We're going to try to hire the best person for the job. But when the season ended, Greg Fiesel even said, hey, we've already got the best man for the job. He's done what we think needed to get done. And he's proven that he's worth it. So we're going to have him stand pat. We're going to have him continue with his job. Could we see something like that again this offseason of, we actually did an internal audit and we are going to make those changes. We're not going to tell you what they are, but we're going to make a couple changes here or there. That wouldn't surprise me if that's how it ends up going. We'll see. Felix saying, Tulo, my favorite Rocky growing up, a little disappointed. Jeff Terry saying, we're going to win it all this year. Maybe, right? I mean, you just got to win like the next 90 games. And then I think you got a spot in the postseason for sure. Felix also asking, you think Warren keeps his job or we need more time? I think he'll probably end up more likely than not keeping his job. I mean, I think he's already shown that, he's making these guys perform better than normal. He's familiar with them. I don't think going outside the organization and what are you going to hire Dusty Baker or Buck Showalter? I don't think that's going to change the fate of the Rockies on field a lot. I think if you hire an experienced manager like that, even a Joe Madden, a manager like that, may not want the job, may not be willing to do what the front office wants their manager to do. And a veteran guy like that, besides not taking the job, if they did, they might be given certain promises and then ruffles some feathers and, make some certain waves saying certain things are not being done the right way and, putting the organization on blast, even ever so slightly. You just don't see that happening in general. That's what makes what James McCann said in Atlanta from a player saying, hey, you don't do that to Craig Kimbrell. That's what even makes that surprising. Teams just don't do something like that. That's professionalism, right? Unfortunately. Fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on how you want to cut it up. But sometimes just keeping your mouth shut is something that's valued in a professional setting. And if you can't hire someone that can keep your mouth shut in that way, then that's someone maybe you don't want for the job. And if you hire someone that isn't going to zip their lip, that could cause bigger problems down the road. And if you don't want those bigger problems, again, don't sign that person. Don't hire that person. So I think Schaefer's doing everything he can to change things, within the house. And I think those things are working as best as possible. So if you bring in better players and you improve this 40-man roster, whether it's, free agency is going to be hard, but still you can make a little bit of a dent. There are those veteran signings that you can make that can have a small but not insignificant impact. I mean, look back to a guy like Gerardo Parra. There have been those kind of players. Brent Suter, that worked out really well a couple years ago. There are those players, even on the fringes, that you can make those moves that don't require a ton of investment to get better. Trades. You give Warren Schaefer a better roster. Now those things he's doing behind the scenes, they're going to get that much more from the roster. And so, I think that's one of the reasons why he will end up sticking around for next year, because he's done everything and more that the Rockies has asked of him. So we will see what happens with that. 40 saying, look at us. I would take Dusty. Sure. Dusty Baker. That would be fantastic. Look, he even got 2 votes. He was the only non-active manager to get votes in the Athletics survey of over 100 players. Which manager would you love to play for? 2 people said Dusty Baker. So good stuff there from the chat. Appreciate you guys. Let's get back to the minor leagues. Kyle Karros back in action after fouling a ball off of his knee, doing a great job. He's now playing a little bit of first base for Hartford. Now, sure, this is a guy that you're saying, leave him at third base. The defense has been solid. Yeah. But when the bat progresses to a certain degree and the position is blocked, you got to find a new spot for that player. That's Hunter Goodman's story right there. He wasn't necessarily blocked at the catcher spot, but his bat progressed more than his glove did. I've got an article coming out pretty soon here over on Just Baseball. And that was something that, his teammate and roommate, Braxton Fulford, commented on. That, look, his bat is what got him to the majors, not his catching defense. And so Kyle Karros, while his defense is strong over at third base, he's got his own tarp play. Not quite like Arenado, but he does have a tarp play there in Hartford. He can get himself to the majors, maybe over at first base. And when it's time for McMahon to move on, or he gets traded, or his deal runs out, you can then shift Karros back over to third base. But in the meantime, maybe he becomes one of those first base options if it's not Michael Toglia as your first baseman of the future. The same can be said of Charlie Condon. We're starting to see him now play a little bit more over at first base. He's got himself a nice on-base streak with High A Spokane. And while I've heard some people suggest, call him up, let's get him to the majors, he's not going to be ready for the majors even by the end of this season. He's just not. He might perform. He might take advantage of certain guys that you can do that to at even some of the upper levels of the minors, but he's really not going to be ready until next year. And I think he could be by about mid-season. I think that's very well a possibility. And he's doing enough right now that you can see a promotion to Double-A Hartford coming. And once you're at Hartford, you're going to get a big league invite to spring training the next year. So that's a given. But it's really been 2.5 weeks that he's been making, Charlie Condon has been making a lot of noise with High A Spokane. So that being said, I think you got to do it a little bit longer, right? You don't want to rush him. The Rockies don't need Charlie Condon right now, because you get Charlie Condon right now. And again, he's not ready. He's just not. But even if you do that now, by the time he's a free agent, is that when you're finally getting good? Or is that, are you going to start paying him now in arbitration when you're still not good? So you don't necessarily need to rush him. Contracts is, that's the business side of baseball that sometimes is a factor with certain promotions and, certain moves that are made within a 40-man or 26-man active roster. So Charlie Condon doing his thing as the number 24 prospect on MLB Pipeline and, making you feel a little bit better after Nick Kurtz, who was taken after him, made his debut for the Athletics. Another guy drafted in 2024, 9th overall, Jack Caglione for the Royals, already making his debut. And we're going to have to wait for Charlie Condon just a little bit. You hope with the wrist, the power starts to develop a little bit more. He's hitting for doubles. We're not seeing quite as many home runs yet, but I think that wrist injury he suffered at the beginning of the season is sapping some of that power. So just be a little bit patient with him. And be a little bit patient with 20-year-old infielder Kelvin Hidalgo, his first time over playing affiliated baseball. He's been really solid, 20 total bases over his last 10 games. He's a guy that you're starting to see on more top 30 lists for the Rockies. So a young guy doing his thing over in Fresno. Keep your eye out on Kelvin Hidalgo. I think he's got a couple cards in the 2025 Bowman set. I don't know if he would have debuted last year. I'm not sure how Bowman does it if you have to make your debut over in the States, which Hidalgo did in the Arizona Complex League. So if you're looking to get those early cards, you can get a deal. I was somewhere, I was at a card shop this past week, and there was a bin where I was $4 for $1. And so picked up a Cole Messina, a Jared Thomas, Brody Brecht, another guy from last year's draft class. So like, okay, cool. Get a couple of those guys' cards. That's neat if you're into the collecting. So keep your eye out for Kelvin Hidalgo. Chat, what do you got? You think Broncos can let us borrow Bo Nix for a game or two? He was borrowed for 2 games already, and the Rockies did win when they played the Yankees. So Rockies 1-for-1 with Bo Nix in the building, 4-4 when Orlando Arcia starts. We'll see if there's some more revenge game in Orlando Arcia in Atlanta this weekend. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, Rockies Insider over on YouTube. Make sure you are checking out all of the live podcasts that I'm doing over there. Subscribe so you know when I am going live, whether it's from the home studio in the Lions Den or whether it's here at Coors Field. You got to subscribe to the Rockies Insider on YouTube to see that and the clips. The clips. Bob Melvin of the San Francisco Giants, previously of the San Diego Padres. Previously, who did Bob Melvin manage before the Padres? Do you remember? Well, it's the 30th anniversary of Coors Field, and I asked him that point blank. What are your favorite memories? What are your least favorite memories? And Bob Melvin said, I can't tell you what he said. You got to go to the Rockies Insider channel over on YouTube, but I'd kind of forgotten about it. I thought he was going to talk about something with the Padres or his time with the A's. But no, he brought up an all-time great memory for Rockies fans and this franchise history. Bob Melvin said, I'll tell you my least favorite. Not my favorite moment, but my least favorite moment. Rockies Insider channel over on YouTube. Go watch that now. Appreciate everyone dropping by in the chat, giving me a plentiful amounts of momentum. But that momentum, unfortunately, can only be as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then.